Okay, the second video that we're going to have a look at is for the Destruction of Sennachrib, which is on page 25 of your anthologies. So you can see with this poem that what I've done here is using a completely different colour, just giving you a few glossary terms to add in first of all. So it's worth adding these in, and then we'll go back and have a look at the poem AO3 and AO2. So a couple of things that I would advise you to do is just keep pausing the clip so that you can add them. So the first stanza has got 4 words for you to note down. We've got Assyrian, which is the name of the army in this poem. Fold, which means a flock of sheep in a sheep pen. Cohorts is troops. And Galilee is a lake in northern Israel. So it gives you a little bit of context already from knowing that glossary and those words. In the second stanza, host is army. Morrow means the next morning. And strown, it's quite an archaic word. We don't use that very often, but it just means scattered. In the third stanza, blast has got 2 meanings. Literally, it means strong wind. And figuratively, it means like divine anger. And then in the penultimate stanza, mail means armour, like chain mail. Ashur is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. Baal is a pagan fertility god. Gentile is a person who's not Jewish, and in this case it's referring to Sennachrib, who is the king of the Assyrian army. And unsmote means not struck. So worth just pausing and making sure that you've got those down for your glossary. So with all of the poems, the first place to start is making sure that you've got context. So I'm going to be using my intention colour again just to make sure that I can link up my macro with the context of this poem. So again, I've taken quite a lot of the information which you can get on BBC Bitesize and lots of other really useful websites, and well done to those people that are doing their own research as well outside of these notes, because obviously everything that I'm talking through is just scratching the surface in some cases. Okay, so let's have a look at this then. Destruction of Sennachrib. It's a short narrative poem, so narrative being the form of the poem, so the style, narrative being storytelling. Okay, so essentially this poem is a story. It's a retelling of a biblical story from the Old Testament, in which God destroys King Sennacherib's Assyrian army as they attack the holy city of Jerusalem. So we've got the topic here. So this entire poem is based around a story that's in the Bible. God is destroying King Sennacherib's Assyrian army. So they're 2 key words that you need to know. Sennacherib being the king, and it's his army, Assyrian, that's attacking Jerusalem. So these are set up as kind of your villains, essentially. They're the bad guys, and they're attacking somewhere peaceful, Jerusalem. So for the context, the speaker presents things in chronological order. Chronological order being 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So it's not, there's no, like poppies where it time shifts. He seems impressed by the might and splendour of the Assyrian army, so we'll look out for that. When it describes their appearance in the first 6 lines, so we'll look at the imagery used for that. However, halfway through the second stanza there's a turning point, so we're going to look for that. Where's the turning point? As he realises the Assyrians' strength is short-lived. So we're looking for that turning point where the Assyrians are going to lose. He then goes on to tell how the angel of death has passed through their camp, wiping them out. Although the Assyrians may have been mighty, the speaker realises that the power of God is even mightier. And there we definitely get the intention of this poem. So no matter what, the power of God is mightier than any mankind or anything mankind can put together. There we go. So I've just highlighted a couple of things that are going to help me with my overall understanding of the poem and when I'm making my analysis and annotations. So I'm going to leave that to one side and have a look at this poem overall, and make sure keep these next to you. Okay, so let's have a look at the poem then. Really important that I'm reading it out loud for you to hear it. Particularly some of the poems like A Poison Tree and Destruction of Sennachrib, there is a lyrical quality to it on purpose. Okay, so just follow with me. See if you can notice any macro comments that you might make about this poem. The Destruction of Sennachrib. The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold. And the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea, when the blue wave rolls nightly on deep Galilee. Like the leaves of the forest when summer is green, that host with their banners at sunset were seen. Like the leaves of the forest when autumn hath blown, that host on the morrow lay withered and strown. For the angel of death spread his wings on the blast, and breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts but once heaved, for ever grew still. And there laid the steed with his nostril all wide, but through it there rolled not the breath of his pride. And the foam of his gasping lay white on the turf, and cold as the spray of the rock-beating surf. And there lay the rider, distorted and pale, with the dew on his brow and rust on his mail. And the tents were all silent, and the banners alone, the lances unlifted, the trumpet unblown. And the widows of Ashur are loud in their wail, and the idols are broke in the temple of Baal. And the might of the Gentile, unsmote by the sword, have melted like snow in the glance of the Lord. So hopefully what you've been able to see, let me just sharpen that there, is the lyrical quality of this poem. And you should be able to spot some similarities with A Poison Tree in terms of its overall context. So you should be able to notice there, if I just pull across to A Poison Tree, we can see that we've got quatrains just the same as A Poison Tree. So remember, a quatrain is a stanza with 4 lines. It's quite a standard of British poetry, quite a lot of British poetry. So let's put our macro up here. So overview of the poem. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 6 times quatrains. And again, I'm hoping what you'll notice is actually the rhyme scheme is really similar. We've got those rhyming couplets, fold, gold, sea, Galilee. So we've still got, which is another similarity to A Poison Tree, A, A, B, B, A, A, B, B. And you can do that all the way down. I'll just do that there so that you can see the structure of the poem there. It makes it really easy to read. It keeps it quite lively. It's quite a vibrant, easy to read poem, which again, like A Poison Tree, contrasts with the tragedy and the violence that is unfolding throughout the conflict in the poem. So this one is quite lively. It's quite fast paced, and maybe that fast pace reflects the speed at which the destruction of the army was accomplished by God, essentially. So it could have multiple meanings there. We've got the speed of the conflict, how quickly that the control can be taken back, and God can exert his power, essentially. Again, that links to his intention of this poem, which is God is mightier. So I'm going to pop that at the top. So again, maybe the lyrical quality to it is the fact that it's speedy, it's fast, God is in control the whole time. And we see that in the chronology, we see that in the ongoing structure that is there. Yeah, so, okay, the next thing that I would just acknowledge, which we've said before, is it's in chronological order, because obviously if you're comparing it with something like Poppies, they have time shifts. So I'm going to note that at the top as well, that it is chronological. As a story, because we have acknowledged it's a narrative. Again, I'm just noting the things here because I would use these in my introduction. We've got it's a narrative, it's a storytelling of a Bible story, it's in chronological order, all reflecting that God is mightier through the lively, fast-paced destruction of King Sennacherib's army, and the 6 quatrains represent this throughout. There is an awful lot you can talk about here in terms of structure, which is much more detailed than a video can probably help you with, but I would look up the lines in this poem are anapest, which I'm not going to go into in this video, but please have a look. it does use anapest, which is about the syllables in the line, which for those people looking at high level, it's worth looking that up. And the other thing that I want to note, which is new terminology, but perhaps you could apply this to several other poems, is we get something called end stops. End stops, you can see, is when there is punctuation at the end of every single line. It almost forces the reader to stop. And that doesn't happen all the way through. It's almost like the opposite of enjambment. So we get this kind of forceful stop, literally called an end stop. And I think I could link that quite easily to God is mightier, almost like he is in control. There is this, the poet is playing the role of someone who can control others, control the army, maybe representing the idea that God can control humankind and he can force a stop whenever he wants to. And here I think that's represented through that punctuation, which you can see all the way throughout the poem. Okay. Yeah, so I think we've talked about everything that we need to for the macro, and that the flow is kind of like a driving force, which is like God can control and force through anything. Let's have a look a little bit more when we zoom in and see if we can pick out some of the key features and themes that are used. Quite a lot of similes that you'll be able to spot at the beginning. So I think my vocabulary colour, because I always want to pick something from the title, I'm going to definitely go for the word destruction. And when I think about destruction, it almost makes me think completely. So it's complete, there's no coming back from it. There's a sense of loss, like they've lost, they've been beaten, which again is linking to that idea that even a king, no one is mighty and nobody is above God. No one is stronger than God. Which links to that intention of the poet. Okay, so let's have a look at how the Assyrian army is represented, because remember we read that at the beginning of the poem, particularly in the first 6 lines, lots of imagery reflects what they're like. So let's have a look. So the Assyrian army came down like a wolf on the fold. Hopefully we have spotted the simile through the word like. But it's no good as just saying that. We have to zoom in on what the image is of. So it's comparing the Assyrian army to a wolf against the fold being Jerusalem, the people of Jerusalem, which are like sheep. So we get this setup here of like predator and prey. And that's your first inference. So the next place you go to is, well, what else does a predator make you think? That it's telling us about the army. If they are predatory, then they're going to kill. Then there is no empathy. We're meant to dislike them. We're put in a position where we are meant to hate the Assyrian army. And in the same turn, we're meant to feel sympathy for the flock of sheep. So arguably, you could say, potentially, by comparing religious people of Jerusalem to sheep, almost like they are all following one. There could be a negative there, but I don't think that's the intention of the poet, so just be careful with that one. But it is representing the Jerusalem people as prey, as weak, almost like they need looking after, they need protecting, but also that they are innocent as well. Next one, and his cohort, so his troop are gleaming in purple and gold. So here we get the imagery, and I'm going to use my vocabulary colour for this one. The purple and gold. So purple and gold have got connotations of wealth. It taps into that comparison of capitalist culture, particularly relevant today, that money can be anything or be anyone. Purple being expensive to make, so purple was always seen as quite a royal colour, and same with gold. So again, almost they've got everything, they've got wealth, so the belief that if you've got money you should be respected. This poem is definitely not on that side. This poem is arguing for the side of religion, of looking after others, and against this idea that wealth can beat everything. In fact, it's completely against this, which we can see from the rest of the poem. The sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea. So hopefully in this line you can see the S's. We've got their shining spears was like stars on the sea. So we've got the sibilants in the S's, but we've also got the imagery, the simile being used here as well, like stars on the sea. Let's just label that as an S. But I'm going to keep with my structure colour because there's 4 of those. I'm going to link it to this one because I've just got more space over here. But it doesn't really matter which colour you use, whether it's your imagery colour or your structure colour. It's a good line to pick because you can talk about both. But we've definitely got the sheen of their spears. So we've got something that is man-made. Something that's sharp. Violence, danger, all those inferences. Sharp, violence, danger, destruction. We can see that theme running through here. And then we've got it in comparison to nature. Now, nature runs through. You should be able to spot that there is a semantic field of nature. So that is when there is 3 or more words that link to the same idea. And nature purposely is representing God. So we've got the Assyrian army and everything that is man-made against everything that God has made, which is nature. And nature always will win in this poem over things that are man-made, and you'll be able to spot that as we go through. So we've got this comparison. Now it's not the use of simile, I think, is important here. The sheen of their stars was like the stars on the sea. Now for me that makes me think they're not as strong as, or it's not as powerful as nature. They like to think they are as brilliant and well made as God making the stars and the sea. And I think they're setting up this kind of comparison between man-made versus God-made, but the simile is saying, oh no, hang on a minute, it isn't as good as God. It's just like it, just under. They're trying to be, but not quite. Like, not quite as good as. I hope that made sense, that explanation. That they're setting these up as man-made versus Mother Nature, God-made. Okay. And we get the extension of that, actually, that nature imagery when you read the last line of that quatrain. When the blue wave rolls nightly on deep Galilee. So we've got this this imagery here about the sea. The blue wave rolls. So again, we've got more nature. And I think when you're thinking of waves and the blue sea, I think of how much power it's got, how powerful the sea is, it rolling, it being uncontrollable, it being massive as well, bigger potentially than the army, almost like it's there as God's army waiting, something he's able to control and to control humans with. Okay, second stanza. Again, look at the simile here, like the leaves of the forest when summer is green. So I quite like the way that they use nature here. So we've got the simile again. So, like leaves in the summer. Remember, they're still talking about the Assyrian army. And look how they're describing them. When you first see leaves on the trees in summer, what do you think they're like? So, first, they are new, they are green, they are bright. Okay, now have a think about what they're saying about the army. We're saying that maybe they're young, new, have never experienced war before. If you're green, if you talk about someone being green to something, that reference is quite popular in saying someone's new or they've no experience. So there's the first hint of maybe a little bit of negativity towards the Assyrian army. Like, they might look good in purple and gold, they might look predatory, but actually they're green, they're new, they're not experienced, they are yet to know what it's like to be in war and destruction. And perhaps there is the inference that, well, God's been doing this a really long time. How can you beat that? Second one here, that host with their banners at sunset were seen. So they've even got all the, look at the man-made stuff there. I'll just use my vocabulary colour. So we've got the banners, and look how we've got man-made versus nature. We've got the banners, and then God is like the sunset, which is huge and massive. So almost like sunset is God's banner. You can see them setting up against each other. So we've got the man-made army, we're here with our banners, and then we've got God's version of his banner, which in comparison, a sun is big, it's brighter, it fills the sky, he has so much more power. So you can see how these are juxtaposed on purpose. So remember, juxtaposed doesn't mean opposites, but usually represents two ideas purposely put next to each other for a particular purpose. And I feel like quite often what you spot is their ideas juxtaposed, man-made versus nature in this poem on purpose. So just as a note, I'm just going to note here, we've got juxtaposed ideas, and it's man-made versus nature. I might put it up here. Obviously make your notes as easier to read for yourself as possible if mine don't make sense. And then look at the turning point here. So I'll use my intention colour, I think, just to draw a squiggly line here, because that's all the Assyrian army get in terms of power. Now we get the rest of the poem here, which definitely looks at the loss of power that the Assyrian army have. So look at the simile that is used now, like the leaves of the forest when autumn hath blown. Okay, so now when we think about that simile and we think about leaves in autumn in comparison to leaves in summer, they're now brown, they're crispy, they're easy to break. They also fall to the ground easily. So already we've got this image that they're easy to destroy, which means the army's easy to destroy, which means humans were easy to destroy in this fight. This seems like a non-contest. That host on the morrow lay withered and strown. So that's quite a visual image there. We've got the people on the army, the soldiers are like leaves. They're easy to fall, they break, they're dyed. And it's quite sad, really, when you look at this line here, where it talks about the host, the army, the next morning are withered and strown. So let me use my vocabulary colour there. So we've got this extended simile, because they're still talking about the army as if they're leaves, to be withered and scattered. So we've got quite a visual image of this army just dying on a field. And not just one or two, but scattered, so many of them, hundreds of them, which shows again, all linking back to this: God is mighty, God is powerful. He can set wind to a tree and all the leaves will blow down. That's how easy it was to destroy this army. Okay, stanza 3. Angel of death spread his wings on the blast. So we've got the use of the angel of death on purpose. I'm going to use my intention colour here because the angel of death is representative of God's kind of soldier. The angel of death. The personification of death there, I think, is interesting. Death as an angel that's come down to destroy the army. So we've got quite a visual image. The angel of death spread his wings on the blast. And again, this is where you can see that the glossary is quite important, because we've got the idea that he can just blow that wind, like blow the wind at the leaves and everyone will die. And then it also shows anger. So the blast being divine, godlike anger. So again, we've got God has been betrayed, the army has betrayed God, and that makes him angry. And if God gets angry, then he can kill you. And I've clipped my fingers there just because that makes me think it comes across like it's too easy. So God's anger at being betrayed, betrayed. almost like a how dare humans think that they are better, bolder, bigger than me. And again, you get the idea that this is so easy as well. Look at the personification there, and breathed in the face. So the angel breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. So again, we've got the sibilance, and in a lot of poems we can see this word foe. It was in a poison tree, it's in the man he killed, it's in quite a lot of them. So we've got the sibilance there, that the angel of death has just breathed in the face of the enemy. And that face to face, this makes me think of the man he killed. You know, that sets up that conflict. But this is God versus mankind, or God versus the Assyrian army, face to face. Let's put that, God versus the Assyrian army. And that breathed, again, sorry, this is my imagery colour. It's too easy. It's too simple. He's so powerful that all he has to do is breathe and people can die. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill. Look at that adverb there. It's really warning like. That deadly and waxed. He can take the life away from you. I get an image of kind of like cold, like dead eyes. It's making me think of exposure, actually, the reference to nature and God controlling that nature. And whereas exposure is very much like, how can God do this to us? You know, we're losing our faith. This poem is definitely more about, well, God has control of that nature, and he can do whatever he wants with it. So this would be a good one to compare with exposure, actually. So we've got the adverb. And again, this is talking about the death, about the control of death, and their hearts but once heaved. So that, look at the wrong colour, look at the sibilance there, their hearts once heaved. Heaved is making me think of how difficult it is, almost like how hard it is to be human. If you heave, it takes a lot of effort to breathe in, so it's making me think pain, difficulty, which is in comparison to how easy it is, the breath there. Look at that juxtaposition. The angel of death can, but for humans, it's painful to breathe. So we get that contrast there, don't we? And how difficult it is for humans and easy it is for God. Okay. Even the exclamation mark there is almost like this is, you know, it was going to happen. We have control. God has control. You were never going to win. That anger maybe has built there to that point, particularly because we've got the divine anger in blast, and the exclamation mark could link to that divine anger. Okay, halfway through the poem. I'm going to pause there because they're quite long videos, and I will pick up with the last 3 stanzas in the second video.